super excited today and a little bit daunted because I'm going to be interviewing a woman who I admire tremendously. She is the author of Empowered by Discomfort. The subtitle is Face Challenges with Confidence Using the 20% Power Principle of Discomfort. My interviewee today is Cristina M. Ramirez. I say it in my Spanish accent. And I have to tell you, Cristina, when I started the book, I read it in one sitting. Your words are so powerful. Your story is powerful, but your words make it even more powerful. So I would love for you to start explaining what prompted you. I know what prompted it, but what prompted you to write this book?
Sure. First, thank you for having me here, Lorraine. And it's you're not the first person that tells me, it's like, I read it in a day or in 2 days. And I think I wrote it in that spirit. I didn't want it to be like this novel, but it's just short, sweet, to the point. You get like this jolt of, oh, okay, I can do this and move on. Right. So what I think, like, a book was always inside of me, and it was just waiting to come out. And the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of it coming out was, so my husband passed away, and he was in ICU out of cancer, and it was very fast, and he had a surgery and things went wrong, and he was in the ICU for 11 days. And during that time, I would post on Facebook, it's like, this happened today, and Joe's this today. And I got so much love from that. And so many, like, I would be, I don't know, it was ski season. So I go up to a mountain and somebody be like, oh my gosh, I used to like wake up and go to the computer to see what happened, and I realized, like you said, that words have power to inspire and to at the time I wasn't thinking that. I was just trying to survive. But after a year of being a widow, I realized that the tools that I used on myself were the same tools that I had coached clients for years. And it all kind of came together, and just like, I wrote it in less than a month. So, I think, like, the experience with Joe was kind of, and in his death was what pushed me to finally get it out there.
So I was one of those people who not eagerly, it was a little mixture of eager to see an update, but sad when it was a sad update. But at the same time, I remember being profoundly touched by your words. And I tried every time I saw one of your updates to let you know the power that your words were having, and the way that you beautifully were describing something that could happen to any of us, has happened to a lot of women, and was a very sad, but you were making it kind of beautiful, if that makes any sense. Like, because I believe, like, we all go through these very tough things in life, most of us, or many of us. And I feel it is definitely in how we deal with it that matters. So tell me a little bit about, like, what did you do before you wrote the book? What is your life experience as a coach and as a person?
Sure. So as a coach, my coaching company, I help moms teach growth mindset to kids. So I help them start a business, and I have a curriculum, and they teach that curriculum to children. So I have been in this personal development world for a long time. And I feel, like, that's who I was before, and that's who I am today, and I feel like the whole point of that 20% power principle of discomfort is, like you said, like, shit happens, like, things happen, and they don't have to, they mold you, but they don't have to they don't have to kill who you were at your essence and at your core. So I know that I'm the happiest and I am the most, like, in my zone when I'm coaching, when I'm doing something like this, when I'm talking to people, when I'm explaining something, when I see that that my knowledge by my experience can help somebody, not because I know more than them, but maybe because I've experienced it in a different way. That's what makes me happy. And I feel like that's what I was before all of this. And that's who I am now. And this experience, Lord knows, I wish I wouldn't have gone through it. Like I would have preferred a way different way of getting here, but it's what life dealt me. And so I'm happiest when I'm talking about it and when I'm helping others through that experience. I don't know if that answered your question, but
completely. And I'm a mom, and I know you're a mom as well. How did your children, did they in any way, shape, or form help you throughout this very difficult year, your most difficult year today?
Yeah, 100%. And what's funny is that, like, how there are those memes is like what you think you look like, but what you actually look like. So we were watching a show it's a tangent, but we were watching a show where like the guy loses his wife or something and he goes crazy, like crazy. And so like you see him 6 months later with like a beard down to here, like completely. And then I looked at my kids, I'm like, aren't you guys lucky that I didn't go crazy? And both of them unanimously were like, So I was like, what? So how I perceive that I went through it and how they perceive that I went through it are different, and that's their experience. But for me, I have two boys, they're 20 months apart. So they're 15 and 17 right now. And they were my North Star, like, because if I didn't have them, like it was easy to make decisions. I had so many decisions to make, but it was like, is this going to be better for them or not best for them? And so it made decision making simple, like what's going to work for them now. And some of those decisions, maybe like we moved cities because they lived it's a long story, but they were in a school in the city. So I moved to be close to them and I didn't want to move. And the house that we bought, like I bought it in an instant. So a lot of those decisions maybe financially weren't the best decisions, or maybe, but they were the right decisions at that time for us. And I honor that. Right. So I don't blame, like, it's just like had they not been there, I don't know what it would have been like, but they gave me the reason to like, okay, like put on your big girl pants, like do what you got to do, make the phone calls that you need to make, just get it done. So they were my inspiration for that.
Well, I can relate. Of course, it was nothing like losing the love of your life. But when I divorced and was on food stamps, when I was 45, my kids, who were then 5 and 8 or 4 and 7, I think it was 4 and 7, they were the reason I got out of bed. Because some days when they were with their dad, some days I didn't get out of bed. Thankfully, they didn't have to see it because they weren't. So they did not see that part. And they remember that time fondly. They were also very little, so. Yeah. But yeah, some people have asked me, how did you get through that? And I was like, my children, It was my first big, I've had, as you have, different, very hard times in my life, but that was my first one as a mother. Mm-hmm. And the way I dealt with it was completely different. It was the same thing that you're saying. Like I decided, for example, instead of going back to Spain with my family where they live, I decided to stay here for them so they could be with their dad and things like that. Maybe it wasn't the best decision, but it was the best decision for them. So I'm sure many other women will relate to that. You opened the book with a heartrending story. Would you like to tell us about it? Because some people might say, okay, well, she lost her husband, but she might have had a fabulous life with no problems because, you look smiling and happy. And but that wasn't the case. You've overcome other things in your life before that.
Yeah. So what makes, I think for me, the death of my husband more sad or more like, it's because like what I always wanted in my life was to be a mom and to have a family. And we built this culture, like my family, like we did things differently, like I picked up and moved from Miami for absolutely no good reason. And now we live in New Mexico, and I was in this little bitty town. Like we did things our way. And it was just such a comfortable, such a like belonging, like, right, like we created this I belong here. So losing him was just like, oh my gosh. But before I even met him, I was 20 something, and I was suicidal. And because in my head I was never going to have that. And in what I had been taught, and I'm not saying that this is right by any stretch of the imagination, but that's what I got, that my family belief was like, a woman needs to be married in order to be happy. Like education, that could go, that could go, but happiness is being married. So when I was in my 30s and I had just another failed relationship, and I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to have it. I'm never going to be happy. So what's the point? And and I realize now, and I've had my stomach pumped more times than I care to admit. Like I was not, it was like a really dark time in my life. And I don't mind sharing about it now, because that was like 20 something years ago, and that's not me anymore. But what I realized is that I didn't want to die. I just wanted to stop feeling the way that I was feeling. But nobody told me that there was somewhere in between, right? That life doesn't have to be black or white. It doesn't have to be like, well, either you kill yourself or you get married, so I was in that really dark place. Then I got sober, and, this again, like this was 20 years, it was in 2003. And I met Joe in AA. Like I met Joe as part of my recovery. So like we built this life that we had together from a place of starting over, from like he was recently sober. I was recently sober. And when, at least when you go as far down as I had gone, like it really is recreating yourself in a healthier, saner way. So we went through that together, and now I feel is like, oh shit, now I'm in that process again of like recreating who I am now, but from a much more evolved place, from a place where I feel like I've had everything that I wanted. Like I wanted this amazing husband, which I got, and he's not a saint. It's not like I look back at him and be like, oh, he did no wrong. I was like, no, he was a normal person like everybody, and he had his good things and his bad things, but we together worked, we together communicated, and I felt loved for all those years. So me redefining myself now comes from a completely different place than back then, when I was just, I like the thought of hurting myself or like not being here, like never, ever, ever crossed my mind. The thought of drinking again, never, ever, ever crossed my mind in this. But the thought of like, okay, I need to recreate me is something that I'm starting to do, right? I have to figure out life as a single mom. So that's what I've been focusing on.
I have several comments to make. One is that as someone who has been a part of 12-step groups for half my life, from Codependence Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, open AA meetings, I know that the first year you're not supposed to do anything major, including having a relationship.
But I didn't. We did not. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So because if somebody told me in AA that I had to believe that the sky was actually purple, I would have believed that the sky was purple. I would have done anything to stop feeling the way that I was feeling. So I did not date. And we played tennis. So tennis was, we went to like tennis clinics, and that's how we became friends. But once the year had passed, man, we started dating, we got engaged, we got married, we had kids. It was just like making up for all that time that we weren't allowed, quote unquote, allowed to date. But yes, I
So I
did
read
fall.
it wrong then. But yeah, I know the 12 steps inside out, and I've done all of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Except, what is it? The 13th step was, or
Yeah.
that I have not done, which is dating someone or coming on to someone in meetings or something. But
Yeah.
and as for the self-harm, I can relate as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, because as you said, like I never contemplated taking my life, but I did self-harm. And during the pandemic, I got a tattoo in the arm that I used to harm. And obviously I wasn't going to die from that, but it certainly caught people's attention. So it was a call
Yeah.
for attention. And now I can laugh, but it was obviously, it's horrifying to be in that position where you would do anything to yourself that is harmful to not feel pain. And I mean emotional pain. And so I can relate to that, definitely.
What's even weirder is that at that time, it's like it makes total sense to you.
Of course it does.
That's how, in the bad space that we're in, that we actually think, because that is okay, or that we deserve, I whatever it is that we were thinking, right? And so when I was in the depths of my depression, and again, I had just turned 30. I actually thought that the world would be better if I wasn't in it. It's not that I could access a sane, rational, healthy mind. Like I didn't have access to those thoughts. I only had access to the thoughts of like, you're not worthy or whatever it is I was thinking at the time. So I understand, but so when somebody is in that depth, it's hard for them to be able to see, okay, there's hope, unless people like you or people like I come around, or like people that came before me in AA and says like, I know what you were feeling and I've been there, but I've gotten out and I can show you how. And I hope, like, there are books that I have read that I can definitely say that book changed my life. Not because it gave me, the secret to blah, 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 but because there was something in it that caused a shift inside of me to think is like, okay, maybe that's possible. And I hope that my book is that for somebody out there.
I think it is. I also told you, and you know this, that a very close family member, now I won't say who it is because it did kind of compromise her work at some point, but is a recovering alcoholic and also tried to take her life and has had her stomach pumped and was in psychiatric ward. So it's not like before we turned on the record, I was like, I want to be respectful of you, but not of that. It was more the grief. And you're thinking that I'm talking about recovery. And I'm like, no, I just think that's normal. Everybody is recovering from something, whether formally or not. Because sometimes, like I was, I guess, lucky to know that I had what they now call major depressive disorder. Back then it was just depression or clinical depression and anxiety. And I still take medication. I still do yoga. But I have to work at it. It's not like, oh, I'm this happy person. But if your book gave me something, it was a realization that, goodness, I am turning 60 this year, hopefully. And because you never know, honestly. And as we know, and so it's taken me all these years to reach this point where I have tools and I have things that I can access. Like, okay, I'm feeling like a few months ago, I was feeling depressed, but not sad. Well, you know the difference between being sad and being depressed. And when you're feeling depressed, it's like, it's not somebody can't come and say, hey, snap out of it, or hey, look what a beautiful day. And that beautiful day contrasts with the darkness you're feeling inside. Is so only someone who's known that grip, like a cold hand gripping your heart, that it's on your insides, that no, like even my husband, my current husband, hopefully the only husband, yeah, that's it. But he's never thankfully been that depressed like that. So he doesn't I can explain it to him and he will be respectful of it, but he will never understand exactly. And thankfully he gives me my space but he cannot understand it. Whereas someone else in my family who has gone through it would. So let's go through that discomfort where you say it's not exactly 20% of discomfort, but it's a certain level, like, and I already know this obviously from life experience. And it's that life is not always perfect. Maybe I have, my profession is going fabulously, but then I am having these horrible problems with one of our kids, or everything is great in the family, but my work is not doing very well. Or so this is most people.
Yeah.
And that's where your solution comes in, or way to cope.
Yeah. And I think that, so the thing is, like, we're always going to have a source of discomfort, but even when we're depressed, it's only 20%. It's only a part of our life. It's just that when we're in that state, we can't see it. Right. But if you're able to remove yourself, you can see it's like, okay, it's my profession or it's my family, but it's not my life is not falling apart. This part, even me in grief, if you would have told me, the month after Joe died, that is like, oh, but that's only 20% of your discomfort, I would have been like, I would have said, yes, I would have probably knocked you out. But in reality, it wasn't, right? Because my life is way bigger than that. So that's the whole point, is that if we normalize it, right, then it's not a matter of squishing it and saying like, well, I don't want to feel it. It's a matter of embracing it with peace and from a place of empowerment, from a place of comfort, from a place of peace, not from a place of avoidance. This shouldn't be happening. I should be happy because Instagram says so. That is the difference. And I feel also it's a lot of my work with kids that they need to learn that resilience, that just because they don't get one thing doesn't mean you just, so what? So you get something else, or you try again, or you do it again, like you're not there yet, that kind of stuff. It's the same concept that I never learned as a kid. But now it really serves me well because I can face, in AA, there's a saying that's like, you can face calamity with serenity. Not there, but I can certainly face discomfort with confidence because I know what to do. I know it'll pass. And then the ninja level is like embracing it because it seems like, ooh, you want to grow? This is what's lighting up right now in order for you to grow. And so if you focus that, then every time you overcome a challenge, you become a different person. You become like, that's all that your discomfort is doing. That's all the challenge is doing. It's not trying to break you down. It's saying it's like, here, come here to grow and to feel like a badass on the other side of it.
I want to, wait, what is it? Here we go. Let's see if I can.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there is the discomfort, and then your life grows around it, and then your life grows bigger, whatever is not the discomfort. The discomfort, as you state, is the same, but things around it get bigger. So it occupies a smaller percentage in your soul or your mind or your being, correct?
Yeah, but it will always, again, so that I see as grief, right? Like that you're never going to forget somebody. You're never going to love them less. Like Joe will always be or have been the love of my life, but my life is going to get bigger. And, his part of my life is going to, like, it hurts to say that, but it's true, right? Like it's going to get smaller because hopefully I live another 20 years, and that's how long we were married. The discomfort I see is like, it will grow with you, but it will only be a part of you. So your discomfort when you're a kid, or when, let's say, like when you're a teen, maybe it's that you didn't make the sports team, right? Or that, Johnny didn't kiss you at the dance, whatever. When you are and it's not to minimize that, it's just that's the discomfort at that. But when you're an adult, and let's say you're a parent, now your discomfort is that your child didn't make it into the team, and that your job is blah, 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 and that this is because there's more of your life, And, you know, my house is a zoo. I have 2 dogs. I had 2 cats. I had 2 kids. I lived, you know, in rural New Mexico. We had like elk that would cross the property, like, you know, so there was constantly something going wrong, but it's because my life was so big, or because there's so many things in it. That's so the discomfort, you know, so there will always be discomfort. And maybe there's even more discomfort, but you can handle it because you're bigger. Your container is bigger. Does that make sense?
Completely. And what I most love about is, like, I've been an avid reader of you know, empowerment or self-help books since I was 17 or 16, which is when I already started having, unfortunately, depression and a terrible eating disorder that messed with my self-esteem and all the rest of it. But sometimes I feel that a lot of those books, which I still read, including your own, is that other books, not this one, have this idea of this is what's going to happen, and then your life is going to be amazing. And you're not saying that. You're saying, here are the tools, because your life is never going to be 100% amazing, ever. And I agree with that. But that does not mean that there are great parts to life. Like, there are sometimes a really good thing happens and a bad thing happens the same day. Like, I know someone who lost her father and had a baby being born like in the same day. And you're like, well, how do you handle that? That's the you know, this happened and I'm really sad, and I'm happy because this other thing happened. So I think it's kind of learning to accept the duality sometimes of life, and sitting with 2 feelings. Like, and I remember this happening, like, during the pandemic. I almost lost my dad. And I remember that the night before he was having surgery, and we kind of said goodbye, really. That night, I found myself not wishing that he would survive. I was wishing for the best possible outcome, which is bananas, because you know, of course I didn't want him to die, but at the same time, I was like, I don't want him to live in a situation which I think is also what Joe's situation was. And he didn't want to live in a way that wasn't him 100%. And I wish that for my dad. And as to me, I was the only person in the family dealing with that, like, that way. And I'm not saying everybody else was worse than me, but I was surprised at myself, because when I was younger, I would have wished for him to live no matter what.
Yeah.
So there comes a time where you're like, whoa, this is me learning. And in my case, it was yoga that brought me to these sitting. Like, when I was super young, I did not have those coping mechanisms. So I self-harmed and also did extreme sports just to get out of my head. And you know, I did not have hip replacement surgeries yet, but I'm scheduled for one. I know you did. From the book, everyone, is all here.
Yeah.
But so now I am able to have a horrible feeling and sit with it, and sometimes realize, okay, this is a whole day that I might be feeling this not good feeling, not pleasant, but I don't have to act on it. Right. And I don't have to do things to try and forget it. Right. I have to go through it and maybe feel as bad as I can. And then the next day will be different. And I already know this. Like, I lost my best friend also to cancer. And that was one of the hardest losses I've had. And like, maybe a month after, my husband still didn't understand how I was still in that grief. But I was like, just let me, like, get through it. Like, when I can't just wish it away. Like, oh, no, I'm not going to. So by realizing that, yes, you can have losses. Yes, you can feel empty. And yes, you can feel like, what the hell is going on? But you can continue. And we can talk. And we can say, oh, you felt that. Oh, I felt that too, for a different reason. But so we're rarely alone also in those feelings, correct?
Correct. And it's so I like to say, is like, it's both and, right? And for me, it came very strongly. So Joe was intubated and he asked to be taken off life support. And there was a part of me that was like, no, like, what do you mean? Like, are we not enough for you to keep fighting? And then there's another part of me that was relieved that was his decision, because like, his life was going to be hell, and consequently my life was going to be hell, you know, just because of the care and everything that was going to be if he ever made it out of there. So I'm grateful. I can be grateful that it was his decision. I can be grateful that he decided that while being more pain than I have ever felt in my entire life because of that decision. So that duality can coexist, and it can coexist gracefully as long as we give ourselves permission. Because the other, our programming might be is like, well, what do you mean you're going to be happy that your husband wants to die? Like, are you crazy? Like, you're so selfish and blah, blah, blah. Like, I could go down that path, but that's not what this was about. So I can live in that duality if I form my own idea and, if I give myself permission to feel what I need to feel, but also allow myself to feel the relief, like to feel like the good and the bad. That's where you find peace, because otherwise you will not find peace, because you'll either be focusing on what is going wrong, or you're going to be focusing on what is going right and afraid of losing it. So peace comes from that duality for me. So I try to explain that in the book.
Well, you do a very good job of it. Let me tell you, I think everybody should read this book. So let's say that, well, first of all, I find it funny when people say, well, where can you find your book? Well, wherever books are sold, that's where you can find her books. Amazon, just go to her website, Empowered by Discomfort. You will find Cristina's book there. What do you think people will get out of the book? Like, if you had to summarize it, what would that be?
Yeah, I give you tools that you already have, but I just remind you of these tools, and it's a simple system like that again, like nothing that you need to learn, is just that you need to give yourself permission to think differently, and whatever you want to change in your life can be changed as long as you align yourself with it. So if you want to be able to face a challenge with a family member, you can. This is how, and I show you, like, just like the process, an internal process that you can help yourself so that you can face whatever that challenge is. To me, it happened to be my husband's death. To you, it might be a family problem. To somebody else, might be a career, and it doesn't matter, because the way to get through it is always the same. And you have those tools, like you have what it takes. You just need to learn how to harness it. That's it. And that's what I hope to teach you in the book, to show you that you can do this, to show you how to harness it, but also to be like, hey, just view life differently. Like it's on, you have the power. Like, we have so much power that we think we don't have. And I hope that that's what the book shows.
It does. And as you know, I'm going through a couple of challenges myself, and this really helped me realize I do have the power. So thank you for that. And the last question is going to be, if people would like to have a coaching session with you, what does that entail? How do you go about it? And, is it a series? Is it just one session, or what?
Sure. So if you go to my website, it can either be Empowered by Discomfort or Cristina M Ramirez.com. I don't do one-on-one coaching, but I do have we do master classes and we do series. So like right now I'm working with a relationship coach. So we're doing like a book study that will go through the book, but it goes through how to handle relationship issues, through reading the book. So that kind of stuff. So if there's nothing there, like we have parenting, we have money, we have like all kinds of stuff, just text me, like there's a contact form, just email me and says like, hey, I'm really interested in help with this. And we can figure something out. I feel like there's more power in a group than there is in a one-on-one coaching. So I prefer, even for me, I prefer group. I'm coached all the time, because I learn more from hearing somebody coach somebody else than me being in it sometimes. So if, let's say that you say, okay, I really want to focus on parenting, or I really want to focus on career. then we can figure something else and maybe get a group together and go through it, as a group and with a focus on career. So
that is fabulous. I might end up joining one of them myself.
yeah, absolutely.
So, Cristina, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for writing the book. Just thank you, because not everybody can turn something sad into a beautiful work of art that's going to help so many people.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you, because if it weren't for people like you, I would write the book and it would just be in my bookshelf and nobody would know about it. So, people like you are so integral in being able to share empowerment, positivity, and tools and stuff. So I appreciate you and being here.
Everybody should read this book.
Read it. It's awesome. And let me know what you think. Just send me an email. My email is right there. I'd love to talk to you.